about how to build business longevity and success through sustainable facility design and operations management. Essentially what that means is a whole lot of words to say how to think about being profitable in a long-term manner when you're either just starting your business or you're already refining an operation that's going. So these principles that I'm going to be presenting to you today, they pertain to facilities that have been running for 5 years. They pertain to facilities that have not even started yet, are still purely in the hypothetical stage, just on paper. So a little bit of background about myself. I originally started in emergency medicine and then decided to leave that career when my father got terminal cancer. I've been a cultivator since I was 16. I grew up on a farm, so it was just one more crop for me to plant. I later actually found out that my great-great-grandfather here is shown in Austria, where he was actually working on a farm in pre-World War II times, doing hemp selections for the largest cordage that they could get to try to do genetic selection and expedited expressions to increase the foliage length. So I found out inadvertently, after I completely changed my career path, that I'm actually a legacy cultivator. And that's some of the things that I like to bring to the market, because we have all started based off of the shoulders of the people that have come before us. Everything that we've achieved in this industry thus far, we're just links in the chain. And you hear a good friend of mine and mentor, Kevin Joger, tomorrow. He's going to talk about craft, and he's going to talk about how even those of us that have built things have really only just added to the links of that chain, and we're all building upon what we have. So be proud of what you have, but be respectful of what came before. So when we talk about sustainability, a lot of people have different definitions, different perspectives. To me, really what sustainability means is it's about managing human activity, managing our inputs, managing our expenses, managing every single piece of capital that we have, whether that capital is emotional, mental, physical, or a resource. And we do that to try to maximize the potential of those individual inputs in the outside. So it's basically, to me, in my mind, very much like an equation. And every one of the factors in those equations is our resources. They are our capitals of different types. And when we're working with those individual types of capital, we're trying to produce the greatest end result from the equation that we can. And why do we do this? Because it's meaningful. Because we're trying to build something for those that come after us. Much like I just mentioned that Kevin's going to talk about, is that we're links in the chain, and that we build upon the shoulders of those that come before us, we build upon that work. But that also means that we have the responsibility to build work for those that come after us. So why does that matter to a business? Like, at the end of the day, we all love what we do, and we all have great emotion attached to what we do. But no matter how much you love what you do, if you don't do it profitably, you don't stick around. And if you don't stick around, you can't make a large impact in the facilities, you can't make a large impact in the industry or in the culture. So for us to be able to continue to do what we love, and for us to be able to continue to provide for those that we want to care for, we need to think about this in the business mind as well. So the things that really come down, in my opinion, having worked in the industry for about a decade now, and having been a cultivator at this point for 18 years, is that there's sort of 6 core principles of why sustainability really impacts your bottom line. That's improving customer satisfaction, improving the environment that we live within, and contributing to long-term success of the business by eliminating operational expenses. The next, like I said, is eliminating those operational expenses, and it really allows us to flourish in the economy and to flourish in the industry when with what we're doing is already allowing us to be compliant, is allowing us to work with consumers and regulators to be able to meet the needs that they have, to be able to meet them at the benchmarks that they're going to require of us. I know a lot of legacy guys, we worked really hard in the industry for a long time, and then all of a sudden, you know, all these legislative rules came out, and all of a sudden we had compliance, and we had metrics that we had to follow, and it was like, all right, well, my system that I designed no longer works within the framework that I have to work within. So it's important for us when we're thinking about the way we build our business, the way we build our teams to structure things, that we think about compliance and we think about regulation, we think about the next steps that are going to be required of us. A lot of us started with, incandescent, working with high pressure sodiums. LED came out and we're like, oh yeah, that's kind of interesting technology, but now it's becoming required technology. Now we are seeing that the industry is regulating our benchmarks of energy consumption, so if you can get ahead of those curves, if you can see them coming before it's required of you, and make the move when you're first starting out, you can save yourself a lot of capital expenditure when you're having to make those adjustments later on down the line. And at the very end, it improves quality and improves safety. So if you're able to think about those 6 core tenets and why sustainability really is profitability, it ties together really, really well when you're building out your business plan. And it allows you to avoid a lot of pitfalls. It allows you to have a thought and design before you're in implementation, because changing something on a piece of paper is so much cheaper than changing it once it's built. If it's even possible or viable once it's built. There's a lot of times where you'll find yourself in a bottleneck and you didn't realize what you didn't know until you knew, and then it was too late. And now it would be as much money, if not more money, than rebuilding a new facility just to fix the old facility's infrastructure.
say some here of the efficiency Vermont, just to make sure everyone's aware. We have a controlled environment agriculture program, and we do offer rebates on high efficiency LED lighting and high efficiency dehumidifiers, and just in general are happy to work with growers on their indoor grow or hybrid style grows, and always open to talking about energy savings and supporting qualified technologies with rebates. So it has to be special VOC listed lighting with some baselines that have to be super seeded to be qualifying for a rebate, but we do offer about a third of incremental cost on high efficiency equipment, just to kind of help people push towards that higher efficiency, higher cost build out of their facility either initially or as a retrofit project. And if you just want to give us a call, we're always happy to help you decide if what you're looking at is qualified for a rebate, or if you ever need any technical resources, we're happy to help if possible.
And people like Tim are exactly who you want to be leaning on. When you're at that pre-construction phase, when you're going through your design plans, when you're thinking about how we're going to make this efficiency happen, how we're going to make this equipment work for us rather than against us, he's one of the types of people that you can lean on, not only for the programs, but for the knowledge as well. Because at the end of the day, our goal is to produce a really high quality crop while conserving our natural resources, reducing our waste, pollution, all of that, to try to have positive impacts on the environment versus negative impacts. We call ourselves the green industry, but we are incredibly wasteful in all honesty. And with the data that's coming out of some of the universities now, specifically on nutritional needs, we have been so vastly overfeeding our plants, and so much of that goes right into leachate, which goes into runoff, which either contaminates the environment or is dumped down the drain. But either way, it's money out of your pocket. So even if you're not doing damage to your environment, you're still losing profit money. And pennies add up. Pennies make dollars, and dollars what decides if you stay in business or not. So the way that we can implement some of these thoughts is in the design process or in the operations of the facilities that are already going. So a handful of things that I like to pick out that sort of have always really stood out to me is the major pain points of facilities are labor, electricity, water, nutrients, media, CO2. So I'm going to talk specifically about a few of those that I found to be the most cost-efficient ones, where we can sort of trim the most fat and make the most impact for the lowest actual cost to our overall overhead. So efficiency and space labor, reducing task time. This is one of the things that we've really failed at in the industry. Labor is our largest expense, and it always will be. Though we always think about nutrients, we think about the electricity, we don't think about labor. And labor is always your largest capital expense, and it's one of the hardest for you to train down on. Because if you've built your facility or you're running your processes in a certain manner that are lacking in efficiency of labor, it's really hard to just be like, okay, we're going to completely overhaul all of our SOPs and how we do everything. We're going to move stations. We're going to move potentially rooms around in the floor plan. That's a really scary thought for an operation that's already moving. You have something, you might think it's working. Most likely, you don't think it's working as well as it could, because otherwise you wouldn't be looking for help. And if you don't think you're doing help, then good for you, you're the 1%, or you just think you are. But basically everybody can look for improvement. Basically everybody can refine their processes. And it really just comes down to being open-minded to it and being able to humble yourself a little bit and look at other industries. We love to think that we're so special and so unique in the cannabis industry. In a lot of ways we are, but we're still manufacturing. We are manufacturing a biological product. And when you look at other industries like manufacturing, they have gotten it down to such a level of efficiency that they're counting pennies, fractions of pennies. Because at the end of the year, it adds up to large margins for them over multiple facilities. Now, when we work in a place like Vermont, we're looking at much smaller scale facilities. So for a lot of you guys, it's easier to sort of miss those built-in efficiencies, because the overall impact that you're seeing at the end of the line doesn't seem like, well, if I 10x this, if I 100x this, now I'm really talking a couple more commas in that number. But at the end of the day, it's still about efficiency, it's still about profit margin, it's still about you being able to survive in the market when consolidation comes. Now, you're still a beautiful young market here, and you've done a pretty good job of insulating you and creating the ability for small producers to thrive here. And I think that you're going to have a longer bubble than most of the other industries, but you're still going to have a bubble. So you need to be preparing for that right now. When pound prices are high, when you're able to rake in some profits, pay off all your debt, get your ROIs, reinvest into your facilities. This is not the time to take vacations. This is the time to double down. This is the time to build your war chest for when the lean times come. I'm coming from Massachusetts. Right now we're looking at $800 to $1,600 a pound, $2K if you're in the top 5% of the producers that are really, really hammering home on their marketing as well as their product quality. The time's coming. And I recommend that all facilities try to build themselves on a 1,000-pound minimum. If you can operate your facility at 1,000 pounds efficiently and effectively when you start, great, rake in the cream, because you're going to need it. You're going to need to reinvest into better lighting. You're going to need to reinvest into better technology as it develops. You're going to need to reinvest into refinement processes later on. Don't wait until the house is on fire to come up with a fire plan. Like, it's a terrible idea to be like, okay, so I'm going to wear my seatbelt the day I get in the accident. Because you never know what's coming. And so you want to try to have these forethoughts of building now isn't really about the right now. It's not about getting the doors open, which for a lot of us, that's the rush, that's the crunch, is just to get the business going, just to get the doors open, to have plants growing. But don't shortchange yourself. Don't shoot yourself in the foot without having the full plan ahead of you, knowing what all of your stages of development are going to be to where you want to get to. Because you want every step, whether it's the lights you buy, the HVAC you install, the insulation, the property that you choose, all of those things, specifically the hard cost things that are really difficult to change down the line, like lighting and infrastructure and HVAC, those are really what are going to define your ability to grow in the future. So if you put that hardcore skeleton together well, you can change out lighting, you can change out irrigation, you can change SOPs, you can change workflow, but you need to have the consideration for it at the very beginning stages. So having that forethought while it's on paper, or when you're already operational and you know that you need to refine to the next step, constantly trying to push that efficiency, and that goes into energy, that goes into water conservation, that goes into our waste management processes. The least you can have going out of your facility means that you're retaining more money within the facility. So runoff, that's money down the drain. Biomass leaving, though certain circumstances you have to allow biomass out of the facility, try to recoup it in some way. Form partnerships where that biomass is going to a secondary product that you might even be able to bring back in the facility and utilize as a nutrition source, or something along those lines. And then pest management, disease management, in my opinion, is sort of the culmination of that forethought. A pound of cure in the cannabis industry is not worth an ounce of prevention. It's more like 10 pounds, because prevention is key. Culture, clean, having a facility that's designed efficiently with a workflow that goes from clean to dirty exclusively, so you don't have back tracing, you don't have cross-contaminations, and you've thought through where everything in your facility goes in cyclic flow so that you're not backtracking. One of the best tools that you can use is something called a spaghetti chart. It sounds stupid, it kind of is, but it's really efficient and effective, and it's brought from actually being manufacturing. Have somebody sit down and watch one of your employees, I've done this so many times, with just a notebook with an outline of what that room's space is. And just have them follow that person as they walk across the room completing their tasks. And at the end, you will have what looks like a rat's nest, most likely. If you've done it well, there's no backtrack. Every step you take is money. Every time you have to pick something up or look for a tool or find your gear is money. Have every room have dedicated implements. And I'll get into this a little bit more later with 5S, but having dedicated tools, having dedicated spaces, having a workflow that does not backtrack, these are all going to go back to not only the efficiencies of labor, but the culture of clean, which is your IPM, which prevents incursion. One thing I can promise every client, something at some point will go wrong. It will. It's the only thing I can promise you. And something at some point will get in. Do you have the plans in place? Have you had thought process so that you know the drill when you smell smoke? Or are you like, yeah, I smell smoke, maybe, no, it's fine. Oh, I see fire. What do we do? You want to have all of that implementation in place so that you can respond and not react. So like we were just talking about, primary costs in the facility. These are the big pain points that we often come across. Labor, electricity and fuel, water and nutrients, followed by media, and then your ancillary. And a lot of people overlook their ancillary. Your gloves, your sticky mats, your IPM cards, your sprays, your solvents, your cleaning materials. All of that stuff adds up. Buying in bulk, you know, the amount of facilities that I've gone into and I watch people pull gloves off the wall like they grow from the wall. Do what you need to do with your gloves on. Have processes in place that don't require you to change gloves 10 times. Just do simple tasks where you could have done 2. Because again, pennies make dollars, and dollars will decide if you stay in business. So the labor runaround, this is sort of going back to what I was just talking about a little bit with spaghetti charts. Having workflow that allows you to not only in the facility move from clean to dirty, so that you're never backtracking and cross-contaminating, but having flows within individual tasks. We'll talk about 5S in a moment, and having the ability to use, is anyone here familiar with Kaizen? So the concept and the thought process of Kaizen really work well with 5S. And again, taking things from automotive industry, cut flowers industry. I mean, if you think that we're efficient farmers, go look at tool Look what happens when they've got 50 acres under glass and they're working with fractions of pennies for profit margins. And you want to talk about how lean they can get. And it's a beautiful thing, honestly, when you look at it. It's a system that works so smoothly. And that means that it's possible for us. It doesn't have to be this crazy growing environment that's a jungle with things out of control. I mean, don't get me wrong, I grew up in that. I love that too. But when we're running a business, it's not just about what we love. It's about doing what we love for a long time. Building something. And if you want to build something that lasts, you have to build it well. You have to build it with a foundation. You have to build it with rock solid intentions. So, floor plans that minimize traffic, empowering your workers. This is something that I don't see enough of in facilities. A lot of facilities, they feel like we need to set rigid SOPs, if we even have SOPs, and so I often get the two opposites, like free willy, just let your workers go and do their tasks, doesn't usually work well. There's a lot of cross-contamination, there's a lot of cross-efficiencies, there's people thinking other people did things and their plants don't get watered, or they get watered twice and now they've gone drowning in their water. So empower your workers. Bring them in on the processes. Bring them in on how you create things. Make them feel like they're empowered and not just employed. But you also have to give them guidance. Bring in teammates and people that are able to help you refine your team. Don't just pick one random dude that's the head guy and be like, all right, it's your job to make everybody do well. Give him a mentor. Give him somebody that he can learn from. And there's plenty of people in the industry that are capable of providing the knowledge and able and capable of providing the support that you need. It's not something you need all the time. Build your team, support your team, have somebody come back somewhat consistently to make sure that they're guided properly. Third-party auditing is a thing that almost every other major industry does. Cannabis industry is still kind of new to that idea. Like, so wait, I'm going to pay you to tell me if I'm doing it right? It's like, well, no, you're going to pay us to tell you if you're doing it efficiently. And if you can improve that efficiency, then you just make up all the money you paid us plus money moving forward. So 5S. 5S is something that I really, really love to see in facilities. It's taken from lean manufacturing, and it can be implemented in everything from your cultivation rooms, your propagation rooms, to your packaging rooms. Having the exact station with everything necessary in the location that that task needs to be performed. So when somebody comes in for their day shift, and they're like, okay, today I'm propagating, and they go to the prop room, they have everything at a station that they need for that propagation, from the pre-work to the sanitation, to the actual cloning, to the post-work, to the post-sanitation, and not only do they have all those tools, but every one of those tools is outlined, where it's supposed to go. So if you get to the station and there's a scissor missing, you know right away, because scissors is labeled above the hook with an outline of scissors, and then you know, all right, who's the last person to use the station? All right, go ask Joe, where are the scissors? How did Joe lose the scissors? Joe's going to get reprimanded because the scissors are supposed to be there when you leave the station. You have a picture right there in front of you, what that station looks like. So there's never any excuse of, well, I didn't read the manual, I forgot today, I wasn't paying attention. Did you look at the photo that's right in front of the workstation that you're at? Because that workstation should look like this workstation when you're done with it. Just like it should look like that when you start. And if it doesn't, you look back at the wall. So it seems to some people that it's an unnecessary step. Come back to me once you've had a problem and tell me how much that cost you. A cross-contamination, a viroid getting in, a mislabeling, whatever it could be, and then tell me whether it was worth the $100 that you put into building the station, the 10 minutes that you took into training your staff to look at the station and how to utilize it, and it will really surprise you how much small little behavioral changes can build that culture of clean and can build a culture of efficiency. Now, one of my favorite things that I actually just recently saw in a facility was a packaging station. The guy went so far as every single box that went out to individual dispensaries, he was like, okay, if it's 50 units, it's placed this way in this box with this specific stuff. And there's a photo for 10 units, 50 units, 100 units, live rosin, flour, eighths, quarters, every product they had, and how it should be packaged in what orientations. That way, every time that the client got it, it looked beautiful, it was organized, it was clean, and it was consistent. Consistency is something that a lot of people on the process end don't think about it. But when you're doing inventory management, when you're a purchasing manager for a dispensary and you're getting tons of boxes, you don't want to be searching through boxes for the inventory you need. You want to open it with a manifest right there and have a manifest that matches the exact outline of the box. And if it's consistent, that's going to increase the amount of times that those people want to purchase from you because you're easy to work with. You're making their life and their job simpler. So by streamlining your process, saving yourself money, and increasing your profit margin, you also just made your end retailer happier, which increases the likelihood that they're going to be purchasing from you consistently, which increases your profit margin. So you made one change that just had a ripple effect across multiple parts of your equation of success. So this is the exact type of thing I was talking about with shadow boxing your workspace. So that way you're able to have everything and there's no question. You know, if there's visual barriers, language barriers, or anything like that. Just a new guy that's nervous. Well, where do I put the scissor back to? Label, it's outlined, it's right there, it's easy. You do it once, every station has it, you never have to worry about it again. It also allows you to do very, very easy things like tracing when you need to be replacing certain pieces of equipment like probes, meters, scissors. These things do break down over time. If you have a list of like, okay, we bought all these probes, but I don't know which rooms these probes are in now. But you're like, okay, I've got a manifest that tells me that we bought all these probes. It tells me that this probe needs to be replaced every 3 months. So I know that workstation 2 in propagation room 1 has a probe that needs to be replaced every 3 months, and I've got it on an auto set. Then you can just remove that whole section of your thought process. You're a big, big, big work. You do not need to be focused on the minutia. I'm really a firm believer in craft and having touch on plants. But there's so much ancillary portions to running a facility that has nothing to do with touching plants that eats your time. Automate as much of the processes as you can, become lean, become efficient. That allows you to be productive, that allows you to spend more time with your plants. That allows you to do that diagnostic work, to do those pheno hunts, to go out and select those cultivars that are going to help to keep your brand popular in the market because you're bringing new things out, because you have the time to. Because you're not running around worrying about hand watering all of your plants. You've got irrigation. All you have to do is check your aerometers, make sure that your set points are correct, do data collection, and not the hard work. So lean practices, value stream mapping is something that can be very useful, especially in post-process. It helps a little bit in process as well, but in post-process, being able to have a visual map that identifies the key processes in the growing facility and in the processes of starting as either a seed or a cut and working all the way through a finished package that's gone out the door to either a dispensary or your retail location. Having that sounds kind of silly, but a visual map really does help people to understand the process better. And the faster you can allow people's minds to assimilate information, the more efficient that they will become at the tasks that you're asking them to do. So this is something that can really help when you're bringing on new people or when you're having people transition within the roles that they're working within the facility. It's less useful for somebody that's been doing the same job for a long period of time. They already understand the map. They've got it in their brains. But when you're bringing somebody in, turnover time for bringing in a new employee, getting them up to speed on the processes that you want them to, value stream mapping can be very useful there. Standardization of work goes right along with that. If we are going to be bringing in new people, and show me one facility that doesn't have a turnover rate, it's an inevitability. You're working with humans. There's going to be people that mesh, there are going to be people that don't. There's going to be people that continue to grow past their position there, and there's going to be people that become stagnant. But one thing you'll always have is turnover in your labor force. So allowing yourself to have a faster and more efficient adaptation of those employees when they're coming into your facility, being able to provide them with step-by-step processes that are very, very clear, very concise, and very easy for them to work with. You take that and you put the standardized SOP with the value stream mapping. Now they understand the visualization of the full flow of the process. They have detailed individual things that tell them how to do every single step of that process. And then when they actually get to the point that they're going to be doing that act, they've got a 5S station right there that not only supports everything that they've just learned, but it gives them the tools right there in front of them that they can utilize to execute that action in an efficient manner and repeatedly, so that way not only are they efficient, but they're effective. Because I don't care how quick you can propagate if you only get a 75% cut through. I can't be dealing with that much cull loss. I ideally want to have a 99%, 98%, and then I have a 10% cull for the strongest to only get in. But if you're struggling to even meet your numbers because you have inconsistencies of efficiency and inconsistencies of efficacy, it doesn't matter how quick you are. You have to do it quick with quality. And then just constantly striving for continuous improvement. And that's one of the things you'll hear me harp on a lot, because complacency is a killer. And in an industry that moves as fast as ours, it is multi-directional as ours, and to some extent as cutthroat as ours, you have to be constantly trying to pursue an evolution. You have to constantly try to do what the plant is doing. Respond to your biotic and abiotic stimuli in your environment, have epigenetic expressions kick in, respond, and evolve. The cannabis industry, in my opinion, and it was a quote that I take from a very close friend, is it's about the art of pivot. It is about constant evolution. If you stay stagnant, you fall really quick, and I could not tell you how true that is. I'm here after 10 years of officially being in the industry. I have pivoted dozens of times. Dozens. I'm pivoting right now, actually. As we speak, I'm working to shift myself into a new direction. There's less new facilities coming online. I'm working more with operations refinement and helping with mergers and acquisitions of distressed assets. Never ever where I thought I would have been. If you had asked me about distressed assets, I would have said, not a chance. I'm a plant person. I like to be dirt foot in the garden. But I see a need there, and I see people that are, struggling that either could work with revitalization or need to liquidate and reassess, and that's where the evolution of the industry is going, so you have to pivot with it. And that works whether you're at the bottom of it in production, or if you're at the top end of it in consumption. So sustainability is risk management. And the reason that I say that is not only is it your profitability, but profitability comes from your evaluation of risk. Your ability to mitigate risk is a large portion of what ties to your success and ties to your profitability. So how we do that is we identify our potential threats, we assess the impacts that they can have and what we can do to impact them. We then respond with a treatment of that assessment, and then we monitor and report on what happened. Almost like it's science. Almost like we come up with an idea of like, I think this is it. We dig into it a little bit further with some research. We find out that that's it. We come up with a way how to impact it, and then we see if it worked. So this is something that should be done in facilities daily. This should just be an integrated part of your process of your thoughts. Every time you have something that is a risk or a potential risk, do a SWOT analysis. See where your strengths and weaknesses are. See where your opportunities are. See where your threats are. And then evolve based on that. Constantly be reassessing yourself, your processes, your market, your direction, and use that as an incremental guidance, a stone that you can step on consistently with repeatable data that you can gather, because you are the data. You just have to go into your facility and gather and look into your market and see what your metrics are. Follow those steps, and you will get very, very interesting information that will allow you to make educated decisions about your next step, your next direction, what your greatest threat is versus what your greatest opportunity is. Which one of those needs your attention first? Are we more worried about the fire that's possibly about to start, or are we more worried about this huge opportunity that we might be able to get to help us? And that allows you to allocate energy, which goes back to our resources, which goes back to efficiency. So this is one of my favorite tools. It's just a standard DPD chart. This is something that a lot of the industry is still not very familiar with. I won't harp on it a lot. Can I get a raise of hands? Who knows VPD? Okay, so still worth mentioning. VPD stands for vapor pressure deficit. It is essentially the differential in the environment between the environment of the tissue of the plant's leaf and the environment around it. That environment is comprised of three things: temperature, relative humidity, and light intensity. So specifically on this chart, what we look at is we're looking at relative humidity, and we're looking at temperature. What those two things do in combination is they exert a pressure, a vacuum force pressure upon the leaf. That leaf has more moisture inside of it than there is in the environment around it. So it creates a vacuum to pull moisture out of that plant. Now we already know plants move nutrition through osmotic pressure. They move from their roots up to their leaves as they transpire. They push moisture out into the environment. So the drier the environment, the faster that osmotic pressure is being shifted through the plant, the faster its nutritional uptake is, the faster it's putting moisture out into the environment because it is getting it sucked out of it. You ever been to Colorado and your lips get chapped every 5 seconds? You drink like a gallon of water a day and your mouth's still dry? It's got a very, very high vapor pressure deficit. Then you go somewhere like Hawaii and you just woke up, just got out of the shower, dried off, and you're already sweating. Very low vapor pressure deficit. Your body is retaining water, it can't evaporate off of it. Now what that does for plants is it guides their metabolism. It guides their nutritional uptake. So this is one of, in my opinion, the simplest low-hanging fruit tools that we can use to impact our cultivation. This allows us to guide whether the plant is struggling to transpire, or is transpiring at a high rate, or is potentially over-transpiring. You can start to get burned, you can start to get dehydration in the stomatas, and the leaves will start to curl in on themselves. So this allows us to very, very carefully and very easily look at two metrics that we already are looking at in our environment, and directly understand how that correlates to the stage of growth the plant is in, because we want to keep it within certain parameters during different stages for specific reasons. And it also allows us to guide nutritional uptake. If I really want to juice the plants, I can throw a high VPD at them, knowing that they are going to uptake as much fertilizer as I'm able to provide to them. That can be good and that can be bad. It's just a thing we can do. This is simply a tool that allows us to manipulate the environments to allow us crops here. And I like to put it in there because it's a very simple one. It's something that already people have the data for. They've already got the tools for in every single growing room. But they might not be understanding exactly why they want to keep it between, 75 to 76 is the range that I like it in. Why? Because of this, because of transpiration, because of respiratory rate and photosynthesis uptake. On the opposite side of things, looking at how to manage your facility with just-in-time inventory. So if you have a small operation, you don't have a lot of storage space, but you have specific things that you're using on a consistent turnover. Just-in-time inventory is something that we've adopted from the restaurant industries and from food And essentially, you have a structure built out that you know, okay, on these dates, I need to order to make sure that we have a constant flow through the facility of exactly how much of the products that we need. Now, buying in bulk is great, it allows you to get discounts, but it also requires storage, it requires temperature control, and that requires money. So when we talk about efficient operations, the most efficient way, sometimes not always, and you have to do a cost analysis here, is to use just-in-time inventory versus stockpiling. Sometimes stockpiling is a better option for you, depending on your operation, your facility, your location, your geography. Sometimes just-in-time inventory is better for you because you can have minimal overhead, minimal infrastructure, but still have everything that you need when you need it to be able to operate. So this just is a closer look. I actually broke down and created a value stream mapping of going through a facility's production model. So electrical consumption in indoor cannabis. This is going to be semi-pertinent to you, but not entirely, because the data that I have from here was from Massachusetts. But it's still pretty much viable across the entire industry because it's a comparative analysis of conventional agriculture, conventional cannabis, and sustainable cannabis. So though the numbers may not be extrapolated from your actual market, the ratios are still going to be pretty comparable. This is probably something that would be really, really perfect for you guys as far as energy use.
This is exciting for sure.
So what's the single largest thing that uses electricity in our facilities? It's our environmental controls. Secondary is our lights, but primary is our environmental control. And if it isn't, you built your facility wrong. Because environmental control is the single most important impact that you have in your facility. If you give me the best lights, the best nutrition, trash environmentals, I'll grow you some beautiful mold. I'll grow you the best mold you've ever seen. But give me the best environmental control, rudimentary lights, and rudimentary nutrition, I can grow you a very consistent, pretty good quality product every time. Because environmental control is really what allows us our greatest influence, in my opinion, over plant metabolism. And basically everything that we are trying to prevent, as far as diseases, is environmentally instigated. Pests and pathogens share a lot of similarities in what they do, but pests are a lot more intrusive, where pathogens are sort of always around. You can't not have microbes in the air. I don't care how good your scrubber systems are. But, and it's important to have good scrubbing, have good UVC in your filtration, having carbon filtration. You need to treat your air appropriately. But really what allows those molecules to take root is by completing the disease triangle, which is a susceptible host, a viable disease, and then the environment that can thrive with it. If you remove the environment that can thrive with it, you remove the capacity for it to take real host within the plants that you have. So if HVAC is your biggest consumption, why is it? Well, it's because we have to mitigate all of the light, we have to mitigate outside temperature and environmental deltas. If we're growing in a greenhouse, we have even more influence than if we're in a closed environment indoors. But what other things within our facility also affect that? Well, our lights affect our HVAC, our irrigation affects our HVAC, our people in the facility affect our HVAC, our media affects our HVAC. Because if I'm growing in 6-inch Rockwell cubes with drip irrigation that's going off every 6 minutes, I'm going to have very different environmental humidity than I would if I'm running in 2-foot deep living soil beds that are 16 feet long. And I've got cover crops that are transpiring all day long, and I'm doing drip irrigation that's a constant flow based off of passive need of the osmotic pressure in the soil. Well, those are going to be completely different needs as far as the HVAC facility is designed, and they're also going to have an impact on what your overall cost is. So ways that we can limit the influences of other systems in this consumption. Currently in Massachusetts, cannabis takes up about 10% of our industrial electrical. And the CCC has actually limited us because of our consumption. We are basically only able to use LEDs to be able to meet the requirements that they've given us. It's 36 watts per square foot. Now they've been a little bit more lenient if you're using extremely high quality LEDs. And it also has been a thing that we can mitigate using remote drivers, because then we can actually use drivers to run separate rooms, and then your square foots, or your watts per square foot is reduced. They've also allowed us to work around it, sometimes using overpowered lights, like a 1500 watt LED, dialed down to 1000 watts, with the extension that we have that extra 500 watts of input because degradation is a thing, and we're looking at the longevity of the light being able to be used in the facility. So that extra 500 watts allows me, as the light degrades, to dial up its intensity to maintain a consistency of PPMD for a longer period of time before I have to replace the lights. So if you're able to work with your specific legislative bodies, sometimes they're a little bit more flexible about that, but it's a big issue.
That's Sarah.
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Dave, also from Efficiency Vermont. I'm a program manager for Cannabis. So most of you know here in Vermont, we have the Cannabis Control Board. Who's setting all of these? If you're looking to start up your operation, what you're looking for energy efficiency is called Rule 2. Out of the book. So it's Rule 2, it's going to set our baselines. Right now, we do not have an LED required baseline or energy equivalent of an LED required baseline in the state of Vermont. Cannabis cultivators are excluded from our traditional commercial building energy standard, and they go by that Rule 2 set forward by the Cannabis Control Board. So double-ended sodium halide is still the baseline, both on energy consumption and model listing for meeting compliance for licensure or relicensure. We'll obviously put in our pitch that if you want LEDs, come talk to us because we can give you money to do that. So we encourage LED adoption, but just a little Vermont specific note.
Utilize that. That right there is a perfect opportunity for efficiency that costs you nothing. So another big thing to consider is water consumption. You're a very thirsty crop, and we tend to overwater, we tend to waste our water, we tend to not want to recapture our water. So an average indoor facility is using 0.048 to 0.96 gallons per square foot of veg. They're using 0.16 to 0.28 gallons of flour. Outdoors using 0.12 to 0.20. Now, you'd think outdoor you'd have to water more, but the actuality is that A, they get some rain, but B, the soil structures that are used outdoors do a better job with higher clay content retaining moisture than the soilless media that we're working with in most indoor conventional. So again, how your media can impact your water efficiency. So sometimes having that fast drain rate, that fast dryback rate, isn't necessarily what you want for efficiency of the facility, especially if you're paying for your water. You may find after a cost analysis that it's like, oh yeah, well I gained a little bit more production by doing that intensive dryback in this manner, but the amount that I gained versus the amount that I'm spending on water versus the amount that I'm putting in the media actually would save me money by growing a little bit less in a more efficient way. So this is a great chart that I really like. Again, this is Massachusetts data, but it really shows how high conventional agriculture, conventional cannabis is compared to sustainable across the board in every single resource that we use except for labor. That was not something I was able to gather data on, but I can tell you, having been in many, many facilities, it's everyone's pain point, and it's everyone's number one cost. I just don't have a ratio of the efficiencies of lean versus non because the data is just not there. I don't know why these come in individually. So how they impact your bottom line. I know I've given a lot of allusions to this, but specifically, the environmental and ecological impacts are designed by your facility, your equipment selections, your location, your cultivation media and methods. Your resource consumption, again, goes back to your cultivation facility, your equipment selections, but also your leanness of operations, your SOP development. Your location will have an impact on that to some extent as well as what inputs and sources you use. Waste management is something that is really difficult in a lot of states because they require us to take any green matter and make it rendered inert or unrecognizable, which basically means that a lot of places have to buy product to mix with their waste material to throw away. Find ways that you can minimize your waste. Utilize it on site or find partnerships with other companies that can utilize it as a biomass, because I have seen some companies that are willing to work with them that they'll come and pick up large truckloads of green biomass that is not yet made inert and unseeable because it's not going in trash. So the municipalities are willing to say, okay, this doesn't meet the regulation that we set, but it's not available to the public. It's going directly to a disposal form, and it's either compost or something along those lines. You can often work in negotiation with those companies that are doing composting to bring you back compost. And now you have a good, clean source of compost, provided you do testing. Always do third-party testing on any inputs that you bring into your facility, even if they come with their own lab analysis, because batches vary and people aren't always honest. But it's a really great way that you can minimize an operational expense while bringing value back into your industry and into your space. Especially this works for outdoor operations. If you're able to compost it on site versus an enclosed environment, go for it. It's a no-brainer to not pay to throw it away. How do we maximize that? We maximize our workflow efficiencies through our facility design and the operation of equipment selection, SOP and culture, your resource capture, and your integrating. So something not enough people are doing, everybody's got DUs. You realize DUs just create RO water, basically. That water is very viable. I wouldn't feed it to your plants, but it's viable as gray water. You can use that in sanitation of the floors, you can use that in wipe downs, you can use that to be passed through a secondary RO and carbon filtration to then be used in indoor. But don't just think you can take it, recapture it, and throw it right back into your plants. You need to watch your biofilm build up in your lines. You need to use UVC to sterilize. and carbon filter for scrubbing, but it's water you paid for. You either brought it up out of your well or you paid for getting it from the town. If you paid to get it from the town, then you also paid for probably a bunch of conditioning, like demineralization, removing fluoride, chlorine, chloramines. So you put a lot of money into that water already. And then you're just going to flush it out of DQ's exhaust right into your capture tanks. Why not just revert it? Put it into a secondary capture unit with the UVC light and carbon filter that allows it to sit there for when you want to wash the floors. Because now you're not now paying the town or pulling more water from your well and reducing your water tables for something that you've already paid to bring in. So the reasons that we do this is for our profit margins and to decrease our operational expenses. Those are the primary ones. And at the end of the day, what those do is they allow us to be efficient, they allow us to be lean, they allow us to stay in the market, and they allow us to be a lot more comfortable, honestly. Because when you have a lean operation, you find yourself with a bit more time. You find yourself with the ability to take a breath, look at the things that you've been considering, go and check on your plants maybe one more time, do that secondary scouting that you were saying you would do, but you didn't get to, get out there with the bang board, go check your sticky pads. I think every farmer that I've ever met would agree that more time is a luxury that they would pay an infinite amount of money for. So why wouldn't we pay a not infinite, a very finite amount of money to provide ourselves with systems that give us that luxury back? So this all sounds really nice, but there is another side to the coin. To build a sustainable facility costs a lot of money. It is going to have a higher a higher CapEx, which is the capital expenditure, versus your OpEx, which is your operational expenditure. The entire purpose of this is that it gives us the ability to sustainably produce business for a long period of time. But to do that, we have to put the money into the infrastructure at the beginning. We have to take the time to do the design properly, think through all of the what ifs and what could be's and how do we want to do things. Literally create every SOP before the facility exists, because those SOPs will actually help to guide you in thinking how much space you need for those individual tasks, where those tasks are going to be best allocated and executed. Taking all of that into consideration does increase your CapEx, because you're now spending a lot of time, money, and energy before the business is ever even built. Before you've ever turned a single light on, you will spend more money on a sustainable operation than you will on a standard operation. But then the longevity of that operation is the key. And the turn and burn model in the industry has been proven time and time again. They'll come into a new acquisition market, they'll set up a shop that's just good enough to get by, they rake in money hand over fist while they're the only game in town. As other people come online, they start getting back on their product, then they'll be like, you know what, this new state's looking hot, we'll go get an operation going over there. Their operation here has started to reach a plateau because the market has caught up as far as quality goes. They're not the only game in town now, and their infrastructure cannot handle the retrofit that it would need to be able to compete in the evolving market, but they knew that. They designed it as a turn and burn. They liquidated that facility and moved to the next state. And that's fine, but if you shortchange yourself in that initially, you do just good enough, you'll always be playing catch up to the operational expenses. And the operational expenses is really what's going to determine whether you stay in business or whether you go bankrupt. Well, you can't go bankrupt because it's cannabis, you can't do Chapter 11. So whether you go into receivership and you become a distressed asset. So taking the time at the beginning, or taking the time when you're already operational and you've got a moment, even if you don't, honestly, because like I said, you don't want to wait until you're, down to your last dollars and the house is on fire to be like, I think we should make some changes. I think we need to refine some things and make some shifts. Do it when you see the wave coming, not when the undertow has already hit you and pulling you out. So like I mentioned, recapturing condensate for dehumidification, using lights that produce minimal ambient thermal signatures. This is a big thing in LEDs. Most LEDs run around 100 to 110 ambient Fahrenheit. You can drastically reduce that even further if you start running remote drivers, because the drivers are what produce the largest amount of heat within the lights. So you're actually able to remove that from the room that you're treating the environmental control in. You can actually use them. Recapture that energy because they're producing heat. Put it in an area you don't want to heat. And you've got little heat sinks that are now dumping heat into a space that you're not having to provide ancillary heat through mini splits or ducted systems. So you're actually able to take something that's producing heat where normally you would have to then deal with that heat by removing it. So you would have to pay to produce the heat, pay to remove the heat from that space, and then pay to get rid of it. Instead, you can pay to produce the heat in a space that you would have had to pay to produce the heat. So now you've just saved yourself 2x on your operational costs just by removing something from the space that you were working with. Don't have HVAC by dehumidification. This is an age-old issue that we've dealt with for the legacy market for forever when we were running, especially like mini split systems and giant quested bandits hanging from the roof and HPS lights, and we were just jacking so much heat into a space because dehumidifiers pump out heat. They do a great job of removing moisture, but they pump out heat. They're air conditioners with a reheat function. And if you're already paying to cool that space, why are you going to dump heat back into that space just to remove moisture? Now, something that's viable here is HVAC. Now, a lot of you guys operate at a smaller scale. We can still work with that. You won't most likely be running DX units just because of the costs. It's not viable for the scale that you're working at. But I've got great people here that are actually clients of mine that we built out a wonderful small-scale facility for them using traditional methodologies. So we use mini splits and pocket DQs, but we did it in a manner very, very focused on infrastructure and the environmental control. So we realized we were not going to be able to sink the money we wanted to or needed to into the environmental control of HVACD. So what we did was we created a better box for it to be within. We sent that money into the infrastructure of the building and the insulation companies. They were able to achieve it like, I think it was a 2-degree delta last summer growing indoors, running mini splits and DQs. And they were able to get phenomenal product production because we were able to make sure that the HVAC wasn't fighting itself. So we're not heating the air to cool the air, to pull air to moisture, to pull the air, to heat the air, to cool the moisture, to cool the air, and you're just finding yourself fighting them. I've seen so many times with the DQ sitting right over the register, and it's like, okay, so you're just force-feeding hot air into the system, and the systems aren't able to handle it, and your set points are never what the deltas are supposed to be. You look at the screen, you're like, well, my temperatures are supposed to be this, but my readings in the room are completely off, and it's because your sensors are in the wrong places, and because you've got your systems fighting each other. So even if you can't do a DX unit, which essentially integrates HVAC with dehumidification, it treats all the molecules in the air as one versus separating moisture out for some reason, and it allows you to have a much better titrated control. It can do dehumidification, it can do your entire thermal offset as far as temperature cooling and heating. It also does filtration and CO2 introduction. So I'm a big fan of DX units. I think that they're really one of the big next steps in the future as far as environmental control and CEA. But they do come with a capital expenditure. So trying to work with companies like theirs to get the efficiencies that you can, to get the rebates, to get the programs that will work with you so you can afford to put the money into your HVAC or HVACD is really something that's worth considering. I would always trade out, get new lights in a couple of years, then trade out my HVAC. Build your skeleton well, and you can always build more muscle. So with water, traditional irrigation methods versus sustainable irrigation methods, this is something that a lot of people become much more familiar with, utilizing drip irrigation, monitored drippers, metered drippers, passive flow systems. Capillary mats is a great way for vegetative growth. It allows you to use pots that are either bottomless or fabric, and it's just a passive water flow through a capillary mat. So when something touches the mat, it allows for osmotic pull through. So you actually don't have any water exposed to the environment, and the plants are able to take up the water at their individual metabolic rates. I think that they're really a phenomenal way to run vegetation. It's one of the best methods. I would use it in flower, but it does not allow for targeted drybacks in cooling because it's a constant passive flow. So waste we already basically talked about, and there's really not much more that you can say about it. Just recycle, reuse, repurpose, regenerate. Common issues we've already touched on. Integrated pest management. It's about, like I said, prevention. Understanding your culture of clean, working that prevention methodology, trying to make sure that you have everything within an economic threshold. It's very rare I go into a facility and they have 0 pest or pressures, pest or disease pressures. It's not a thing. It's whether they're keeping it and managing it within an economic threshold so that it's not having any impact on the environment. So rather than trying to be a perfect facility, trying to be completely clean, make sure that you are doing a good enough job with your preemptive work that nothing ever explodes on you. You never have an incursion become an infestation. But make sure that you're not breaking the bank, just dumping beneficials and dumping pesticides and just having an over-integrated pest management system. You want to ride that fine line of just good enough. And this is one of the few places where that's acceptable, where you really need to be delicate. Because we also find, and Suzanne Wainwright talks about this at length, is that we are our own worst enemies when it comes to pest management. The more you use, the more reactive and responsive they become. They evolve, just like plants, to abiotic and biotic stimuli. So if we constantly keep hitting aphids with the same thing, they become resistant to it. Same thing comes from medical. That's how MRSA became a thing. Methicillin-resistant staphylococcus. We created that by over-antibiotics. So we can do the exact same thing in this and be really careful that we ride that line just good enough to prevent the economic thresholds from being hit, but not so much that we are perfect, sterile, clean room and just dumping them. Excessive PPFD on canopy is something I've been seeing a lot more. For a long time, people were not applying enough light. Now they have high-powered APS, they have high-powered LEDs, and they're over-applying light. You need to understand that light is part of the trifecta of plant health. It needs to have the nutritional capacity and the environmental capacity, which controls the metabolic rate, to be able to process the amount of photosynthetic radiation. So if you've got 1,400 ppfd on canopy, I could probably grow better cannabis with 1,000 ppfd on canopy, just by making sure that the other two factors are perfectly balanced for that plant's photosynthetic respiration capacity. Understanding and being able to calculate the numbers of how much CO2, ppfd, and nutrition can my plant actually take in the environmental parameters that I'm able to create is a key to lean efficiency when it comes to the three biggest costs: lights, electricity, and gas, nutrition. So if we're talking about the three biggest impacts on our thing besides labor, we can affect all three of those by just doing the calculations of plant respiration, understanding what its metabolic rate is, and then applying the right amount of nutrition, photosynthetic radiation, and CO2 that it is able to assimilate and process in the environment that we're able to provide. And that also allows us to adjust and fluctuate. Like in greenhouses, there's massive, massive fluctuation, way bigger than indoors. If we're able to say, okay, our parameters are not ideal, let's adjust our BPD and our nutrition and our CO2 and our light intensity to reach the correct point in that sliding scale for the temperature, the relative humidity that we're able to hit. If our temperature and humidity are out of where we want them, you can readjust plant's metabolism and make it more reactive, to make it more effective in the environment that you have right now. It's not just about always trying to achieve the optimal. It's about the optimal with what you have. Lack of rooms dedicated probes. This is huge. This goes back to that 5S thing. The amount of times I've gone into facilities and they're like, we think we have a disease problem. And then I watch them and they're like, so this plant's at this much and this plant's at this much. And I'm like, where'd that probe come from? Oh, I got it from flower 3. It's like, okay, so you cross-contaminated across the entire facility. You don't even know how bad it is. And now we have to go and do tissue testing on every single plant to make sure your mother stock is clean, to make sure that we can perpetuate the next harvest without having issues. And it would have cost you maybe, a big facility, maybe $2,000 to get dedicated scissors, barometers, soil probes, pH probes. They're not that expensive. And the really expensive stuff, okay, fine. Get one and have really dedicated SOPs as to cleaning and as to how it's supposed to be treated. But that is a huge one that I see all over the place. The amount of times that I've seen growers now, like, they have this little dedicated grower pouch and they're like, yeah, this is my toolkit. And it goes everywhere with me. And like, if you go where? And they're like, everywhere. And I'm like, oh, okay, so those scissors have touched every plant. And they're like, but I sterilized them. How, for how long, with what, and against what? Because not all sterilization is equal. And viroids react very differently than pathogens, like bacteria react very differently than fungi. So you have to know what you're trying to prevent, you know, what application of what piece of sterilization, let's say juice, you want to use, and for how long, because exposure is also a thing. Cyclonic airflow is not something I'm seeing as much now. People are starting to really understand breaking up microclimates. Subcanopy airflow systems is a huge thing if you're not familiar with gas systems. The best thing that I can do to quickly explain it is it easier to get a breath of air when you're facing the wind, or if the wind's blowing from behind your head and you're trying to catch it as it goes by? We're often applying air directly to our canopies from above. The stomata is the mouth of the plant that's on the bottom. That's where it assimilates CO2, that's where it does its gas exchange. So if we're trying to drop CO2 high to then violently cyclonically mix it above the canopy to hope that it gets underneath the canopy, why not just directly provide it from below the canopy directly to the stomata of the plant? This allows for better CO2 assimilation, breaks up microclimates, and it allows for a better balance of leaf temperature to ambient temperature. Because leaf temperature is really what matters to your plant's metabolism, vastly more than your environmental parameters as far as that. But it's easier for us to get a quick temperature reading from the air than to go and laser gun a bunch of flames and take an average temps. So this is just a couple photos I love to throw in, and this is where I like to open it up to the crowd. Be like, you know, what do you see here that is sustainable? What do you see that is not sustainable? What do you see that can be improved? What do you see that's worked? Because I can tell you every one of these facilities is one that I've been in, and every one of them has good and bad features. But I think that that's about it. We'll just get to questions.